What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Southern Jeep and 4x4. Today we're going to be working on the Dana 25 front axle for the 59 CJ5 project. The differential's been set up already. It's the same exact process as the Dana 44 as you saw in the previous video series. We're going to be installing the axles, steering knuckles, kingpin bearings, spindle, all that good stuff. And along with the main attraction, the disc brake conversion kit. It's basically going to be a half-ton Chevrolet front setup, and it's going to make the Jeep stop way better. Not have that drum brake maintenance that you normally have on these, especially with the fronts on getting it to stop straight and everything. And I'll show you some modifications that have to be done to make this conversion work correctly. So, all right, let's get started. Alright, so the first step that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the front hub on the new rotor. So you got these machined edges where the studs go. Just going to line them up, and we're going to do pretty much the same process we did on the rear. If you remember that, or if you saw. The only difference is we can't cheat a little bit and use the hammer to kind of get them to stay. So we're gonna have to use some pliers behind there to keep everything held together. Now I like doing them this way because you don't risk bending the hub or damaging the rotor or anything like that. It's always the first one's going to be the real pain. So we're going to get it drawn up about halfway, because we're most likely going to have to just turn the hub a little bit to get everything to line up nice. Alright. Gotta go a little bit more to get it set. Now I'm just gonna show just a couple of these and then check in after it's completed. Don't need to bore everybody with and if you didn't see the rear axle video, just get you a thick washer and then put you a little bit of grease on the threads and then a little bit of NICs on the knurled portion of the stud, and you'll see that NICs kind of squeeze out, and you'll know you got it drawn in all the way. Alright, so I got the studs installed. Now we're going to go ahead and install our wheel bearing races in the hub. Alright, so the one race is going to face to where the bearing goes in like that, and then the back side is going to be opposite of that. Yeah, I'm still trying to get used to this new camera setup. This tripod I got, it's not very tall. Probably going to go ahead and order a taller one. especially when I do the transmission, transfer case, and engine videos. Gonna need a little bit taller setup. But anyway, for now, that's what we're dealing with. Alright. You don't have to use the erase tool. I've always done it with a punch, but you know, figured I get a little fancier and use the tool. Alright, so now we're going to pack the wheel bearing. It's going to be kind of difficult. Let's get you a little glob of grease. Stuff I like to use is a little bit thicker than normal. Then you just take your bearing, take the back of it, and just pack in the grease as you wipe. And when the grease goes in, it, you know, gets off of your hand. Yes, it's a messy job, but I like to pack the front too. Take that extra grease, pack it in the race. And then pack some more grease behind the bearing. I mean, this is the way I like to do it. Grease is cheap and good insurance. So now we're going to install our hub seal as soon as I can find it. I just had it laying around here. Alright, so I found the seal. It was about 30 feet away on in front of the shop. It must have fell and rolled all the way out when I was installing the races. Took me a little bit to find it, but we're good now. So alright, I'm going to put a little bit of grease, just a real light coating around it. Gonna go ahead and just get it started. And there you go. One thing to be mindful of is don't drive it all the way in, which I just did. Forgot. So I'm just going to pry up on it a little bit, probably just tap on the bearing and drive it out a little bit. And you can reuse these, you know, if they don't have a lot of wear on them. If you needed to repack your wheel bearings, you know, some people do it once a year. You know, you can just pop it out and reuse it. So alright, I'm going to fix that, and then we're going to start reassembling the axle. Alright, so we got the bare axle tube. We're going to go ahead and put in our kingpin bearing races. I already got the bottom one in, and these are just going to tap in. Alright. Now, we can go ahead and put in our kingpin bearing. And these are you're gonna pack these just like you would wheel bearings. They need to be full of grease. Then let me move the camera. Alright, so now we're gonna go ahead and install our steering knuckle. We got the kingpin bearing caps. I'm gonna put a light coat of grease on them so they slide in a little bit easier. And then here's our steering knuckle right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the top one. So something real quick about these steering knuckles. In order to achieve the correct kingpin bearing preload, the top kingpin bearing on CJ2 and ups, you only shim the top. The bottom, according to the manual, they added, I think, like 50 thousandths or 60 thousandths of metal to the knuckle itself. So if you're working on a early CJ2A and a MB or GPW, you're going to have shims on your bottom kingpin cap. And anything later is just going to be the top. So we're going to kind of line it up and then get the top cap started. Alright. And then for our bottom, I'm going to go ahead and slide the bearing underneath. Hopefully that showed up on camera. And then we go ahead and shove it up there. And one upgrade I did to these knuckles is added studs to them. If you remember in the teardown video they had bolts. A popular upgrade is studs. Get a little bit more strength out of them. Alright, so now we're just going to go ahead and throw our nuts on, and then we're going to check the bearing preload and see if we got to add or remove some shims. Alright, so got the all the nuts tightened up, and so we're going to check the preload on the bearings. You're supposed to have a spring scale put into the hole where the tie rod goes and pull and see what the dragging force is. I don't have a spring scale, so we're going to use the split beam torque wrench again and kind of just eyeball it. So we got about 50 inch-pounds. You know, that should be good. I've done a lot of these. It feels good to me. And you know, once we add the seal, the knuckle seal to the back here, that drag is going to increase. You know, because we're going to be dragging a seal on the knuckle ball here. So that's going to be the next step. Before I reposition the camera, I'll show you the contents of the seal kit. This is available on the website. So starting from the knuckle out is going to be the actual knuckle seal. This is going to go in the recess of the knuckle. Then your felt washer or your felt wiper, and then 2 retaining plates. They're going to bolt together like that. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the inner seal. It's got a split in it, so you can put it over the axle tube, and then also you'll see the notches here. That's going to go towards the inside, and we're going to offset our opening. We don't want it really on the top to collect any water and moisture. And it helps too if you put a little bit of grease on that lip, and then also grease the ball end here. So the paint's going to come off you know, as it turns and everything, which is fine. So if it's not cooperating like this one isn't, we'll go ahead and just continue with the felt wiper, and then use the backing plates to draw it in. So the felt wiper, you're just going to have to put a little cut in it. We're going to have to cut it in half. There we go. And then put our top retainer on. Actually, we'll go ahead and put this opening on the bottom, kind of reduce moisture buildup. And just go ahead and fish your bolts through the felt wiper with the retaining plate. And then we will put on our identification tag real quick. So I got the identification tag cleaned up. I just got the one side and primer. It just says Spicer joint on it. Normally they'll either say Spicer or Reassembly, whether the two different axle joints that were available. All right, it's going to be the same drill for the bottom. Alright, so basically get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off, and then I'll tighten these up and then show you the finished product. Alright, so here it is completed. Just got to be primed. Plate's got to be primed and painted. No big deal. Make sure you use hand tools on these. Don't try to drive them home with the impact. Go steady and even with them all, because you don't want to warp your plate, and then, you know, obviously you don't want to risk breaking one of the bolts off. But there it is, and it's going to be, there we go. So basically it just wipes the grease. You saw that? So any kind of grease leaks, and then any kind of dirt buildup or anything like that, that felt wiper is going to wipe that off. So that's why I just got a light layer of grease on there to kind of lubricate that felt so it doesn't burn out prematurely. And that's basically the whole premise of it. All right, let's go ahead and install the axle and spindle, and then I'll show you how to pack these knuckles. All right, so real quick, we're going to pack the knuckle. So this is going to be a mixture of grease and gear oil, and you're going to maintain the level with the plug here. So I'm going to go ahead and just start packing the knuckle with grease. If you don't have access to the front of the knuckle, you know, like if the spindle's still on, just take your grease gun and you know, just start packing it with the grease gun through the fill port, and then top off with gear oil. And that's the purpose of this, is to keep the kingpin bearings lubricated, and also the U-joint in the axle shaft, because they're non-greasable U-joints. They got pretty much like an open caps for the needle bearings for pretty much splash lubrication. So that should do it. Maybe one little scoop more. And one thing I forgot to mention before I forget, if you do decide to do, whether you do studs or bolts, make sure you RTV the bottom bolts or studs, because that's another leak point. So if you put some RTV on the threads, that'll reduce the chance of a leak. So since we got it open and we got some space, we'll go ahead and throwing some gear oil. And when that put too much in there, we're leaking out of the hole. Got a little crazy with it. Anyway, so here's the axle shaft. So you got this surface here is going to touch the spindle bushing, which we'll show here in just a few minutes. And then this surface here is going to ride on the seal, and then this goes into your side gears. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little grease on both of those surfaces. Because we don't want to burn any seals up. Make sure everything's lubricated. And on these axle shafts, the U-joints were not replaced. We had a hard time finding them, and also this Jeep is going to get locking hubs. So I'll explain that a little bit for you, for those of you that don't know what locking hubs are. But with the locking hubs, this axle is not going to spin unless, you know, the driver gets out, engages the hubs, and engages the hubs. This axle shaft won't spin. So that, before I forget again, when you add locking hubs to these Jeeps, this axle shaft's not spinning. And when it's not spinning, it's not flinging that grease and gear oil mixture around your kingpin bearings and your U-joint. So I recommend, and I do on my own Jeep, is you know, every couple months or so I'll engage the hubs and engage the axle so everything rotates and flings around in there. So that's just a tip in case, you know, this is your first closed knuckle axle, because, you know, you don't have to worry about that with modern axles. It's all, you know, integral bearings and, you know, ball joints and all that stuff. You don't really use these kingpin bearings like this. Alright, so the next step, we're going to go ahead and put the spindle on. So you got a brass bushing in here. Went ahead and mic'd it. It's good to go. Not a lot of wear. Replacements are available on the website. So put some RTV behind it, and when we go to install it, make sure your notch is facing up. It's not required. It's just going to make your life easier when we go to put the wheel bearings back in. So we'll just go ahead and get it snugged. Alright, and then here's our backing plate where our caliper is going to mount to. That's going to go on. So we're going to be stacking a lot of stuff on here. So we get that backing plate, and then basically like a dust shield. You don't have to put the dust shield on if you don't want to, but we're going to. So alright, so you're going to put your dust cover bolts through the backing plate, kind of as like an assembly, and then our backing plates where it needs to be. Actually, it probably needs to go one half a hole up. There we go. So you're looking for like a 2 o'clock and a 10 o'clock, depending on the side. And this is kind of the hard part, because the bolts are only 1 inch long. Because if you go too long, you'll risk hitting the U-joint. Studs would be ideal on the knuckle. Alright, so I got those two started, and we got RTV on these, on the 2 bolts that are going to go on the bottom, because we're going to, you know, have that little oil slurry mix in there. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get these all started and I'll check back in. Alright, so I got those all secured. Go ahead and throw some grease on the spindle. And before I forget, we're going to go ahead and paint the dust cover inside here, and then we'll go ahead and throw on the rotor and hub. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and throw on the rotor and hub. Got it painted and got grease on the spindle. There we go. That's all that excess grease, which is no problem. The more the merrier. And we're going to put the outer wheel bearing in. Get it on the spindle and pushed in. There we go. You're going to push it all the way in with your fingers. So now we're going to take our lock nut washers, our retaining washers, and we're going to put the groove of the washer into the groove of the spindle. That's going to go inside of the bearing, and then our nut. Hopefully my hand's not too much in the way, but basically you get the idea. Alright. It's just going to be easier to put it in there. Alright, so there's going to be another nut and another washer. We're going to set the wheel bearing preload with this nut first, and then the other nut and washer is just basically a safety. And yes, they're very fine threads, so it's going to take a little bit of time. Alright. Just trying not to get my hands pinched. This is a lot better to do when the tire's on. We'll probably do that once the tire's on it, because you get more inertia on the hub. Alright, so we got that pretty tight. Still turning, and I'm going to back off at about 1/8 of a turn. There we go. Alright. So we're going to put our retaining washer in, our second retaining washer, and then our second nut. And yeah, I'm reusing the old nuts and washers. There's nothing wrong with them. They cleaned up real nice. They just got some old punch marks on them. Because you don't need a socket. You can use a hammer and punch. And I'll just go ahead and tighten. Alright, there we go. Alright, so one thing that's overlooked and forgotten about is you need to change the plug type on your steering knuckle. We got a recessed Allen type plug. I just got some pipe dope on it. We're going to go ahead and draw it all the way in, get it nice and tight, and that should provide enough clearance for the caliper to clear, because the stock hex style gets in the way of the caliper. And then also don't forget to top it off with oil, and then you're just going to bring up the level until it starts to fall out of the plug. So now, probably the most time-consuming part is we need to grind down the edge of the knuckle here, and we're also going to have to grind down the caliper. So where you're going to grind down at is going to be between these two bolts here, and we're just going to keep putting the caliper on and off until we got, you know, some clearance in between there. We don't want, you know, no clearance, because that'll bind the caliper up. We want to be able to see some daylight through there, you know, just enough to where it's not too much material removed, and then not too little where it's going to bind up. So alright, so I removed some material, and I got the caliper on with no bolts. So now we can only remove so much material from the knuckle. So we're going to go ahead and remove some material from the caliper. So I'll go ahead and just mark that out with the Sharpie. I'm going to go ahead and grind it down off camera to save some time. And we'll keep going back and forth until we get a good fit. Alright, had to remove a lot of material from the knuckle and even more from the caliper. So this is how much grinding is required. The casting here for the piston housing, this had a whole lip this thick over here. I mean on top here, we had to grind all that off to clear the plug, and then this corner here to clear here, because we didn't want to take too much out of the knuckle. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble the caliper. And these are 70s GM truck calipers, if you're curious. And if they go out on you, you're going to have to do the same process to the new caliper, you know, to the replacement caliper, which kind of sucks, because I've gone through, I don't know, probably like 3 calipers on my Jeep since I've done this upgrade. They don't like to sit. So go ahead and get them bolts started. Raise this up a little bit. Here we go. Here, I'll kind of show you the clearance. I mean, it's a super close gap, but it'll be enough for when the caliper heats up. You know, it won't cause any binding or anything like that. And we're just mocking this. I'm just, you know, making sure the rotor spins freely, and then I'm going to take it back off and prime and paint it and put never sees on the bolts and all that good stuff. Alright, so no binding, it's nice and free. I mean, that's what the caliper, you know, relaxed. But if it was not on there straight and everything, we'd have some binding, especially on that inner pad. So everything's spinning good, so I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to take the caliper off, prime and paint the backing plate, the caliper, the front hub, and then we are leaving the flange off because this is getting locking hubs. They're not in yet. I got the other side done. I'll show you it, since I'm going to be waiting on paint to dry for this, and we'll close out the video. Alright, so here it is completed. I just threw on the hub flange. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, just to keep some dirt and grime out until we get hubs. But this just goes over the splines, and then you pull out your axle shaft and it'll expose a groove, and then that gets a snap ring to retain it, and then also a grease cap. So here is a disc brake conversion. This is going to get another coat of paint. It's just got one light coat of black, and it'll get nice and purty once it's ready to be put on. So alright everybody, I appreciate you watching. If you got any questions or comments about this conversion or anything in this video or previous videos, send me an email at southernjeepand4x4.com, and I'll have my link for that. And also the bearings and seal kit and everything like that's available on the website. Check it out. So alright, until next time, y'all have a good one.